Dear colleagues, greetings. We continue our working day, and now we will speak about Volodymyr as hostage of unpunished crimes of totalitarianism. Iryna Prelovska, doctor of church studies and professor of Kyiv religious school of Orthodox school. Oleh Shepetyak, doctor of philosophy. Iryna Okoyev, the head of Kyiv organization of Memorial after Ivan's and Volodymyr Averyanov, president of the NGO European Christian Congress. So the floor is yours, colleagues. Volodymyr Averyanov, the European Christian Congress. Some words about our civic organization. Organization was set up. We understand that every thought is a Christian, and two-thirds are Christians. What is happening in Ukraine? In our view, it doesn't create that Christian solidarity we would like to have. Yes, we are supported by church, but we would like to have more solidarity, Christian solidarity with Ukraine to stop the aggression. Once we created, we set up the first conference of genocide of Armenians and Ottoman Empire. There was in Dnipropetrovsk, and we started the Christian world saw genocide of Armenians, and they recognized, but they didn't stop it at that time. In that conference, we confirmed there was such studies, and they showed that, yeah, so the Republic, instead of holding a genocide, they started to negotiate them. They gave money, gold, and they gave it to Nakhchivan, to Nagorno-Karabakh, and that genocide turned into an Armenian issue. What is happening around Ukraine? We would like it to turn into Ukrainian issue. That's why we set up our organization, and we initiated the conference in Kyiv Bible Academy with the support of Ukrainian Orthodox Church and Greek Catholic Church. We understand that Malta became the hostage of unpunished crimes of Soviet totalitarian system and those compromises of the World War II. That's why we held that conference, which we had more than 50 presenters, and they considered issues. They touched all the confessions, because there was no confession that was not persecuted under Soviet totalitarian system. Also, we started a cooperation of that regime with so-called Moscow Church. And since the time they started to persecute it, they started to cooperate. And that brought to destroyment of Greek Catholic Church, and it was reburned in Ukraine, but we should remember how the patriarchy was destroyed, and those issues the walls, because of mercantilism and because of geopolitical issues, can treat Ukraine like can neglect Ukraine. That's why we set up the Congress, and we want it to wake up European society, in other words. Thank you. Please. Priest Shepetyak, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. Today, priest of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. It's difficult, and not only because of this problem, external problem, because we have internal problems. Our state goes through many divisions, internal divisions. It has happened in our history that today Christians of Ukraine are divided, and Ukrainians not always can find a common language with Ukrainians. But after this independence, half of a century, we should start talking about unity. all Christians in Ukraine and also of Ukrainian nation. If we want to do what Jesus Christ asked us for all us to be united. And history brought a lot of harm to us, to every nation in Europe, and Ukraine suffered especially heavily because of that. And when we live through one more crisis and external aggression, we can stand against those external problems only when we become strong inside Ukraine. For that requires understanding, and nothing can be stronger. No better platform for unity and mutual organization than the belief in one God and within one church. That issue is especially sharp in Ukraine. And raise the issue of unpunished crimes in the past. We raise it because we would like to give objective assessment to history, to the past, for us not to repeat those problems which we had once. For those evil measures of history were forever turned. On behalf of churches and on behalf of every Ukrainian who cares about the state, we call our people to unity and to understanding and dialogue between confessions, Ukrainian, national. For us to have such a time when Ukrainian people and Ukrainian church in Ukraine and in the diaspora to be united, and for the glory of God and for the benefit of Ukrainian people. Thank you. Iryna Prelovska, Kyiv Bible Academy, and historians, when they start talking, they speak about the work and how the Ukrainian people live through not only what has happened as an undeclared war, which consumes lots of lives and means, and which damages irreparably Ukraine. If we look at a different problem, which is almost has no articulation in this is a crisis of Ukrainian identity and a crisis of Ukrainian memory, or memory of Ukrainian people whom will turn away many times because of history. That's our history. If you look at the beginning of the 20th century in 1920, when Ukrainian statehood, Ukraine wanted to develop and wanted to build independent Ukrainian state and church. Russian Bolsheviks troops imposed to Ukraine a very specific variant of statehood. Communist experiment. They began that in 1920s and that lasted until 1991. And to some extent it continues. It lives. The point of the experiment to take, to destroy and to kill aristocracy and the rest who don't fit communist society, like priests and clergy. So there was an issue. The task was to destroy those layers of society to build so-called communist future. What, for example, Ukrainian and Russian communists are taken care of, and different left blocs. In the 20th, there was a huge campaign. They started to discredit and to loot all churches and religions, and they suffered because of that. But in the 30s, there was a period when the number of killed reached hundreds of thousands and even millions, and there was a crime. They committed a crime, and we historians, we cannot format it, and we cannot approach it statistically, and especially to make the lists. You see that neither on territory of Lukiansky prison, and this is Lukiansky, so not on Lukiansky Park, not Park Bakiansky cemetery. You can continue that list in every region of Ukraine. There is no stela or just some evidence of those because of relatives of those who died as a result of this communist crime. We can see only some monuments and installed by relatives or enthusiasts. When we speak about such crimes, public opinion looks what historians and archives of SBU, regional and national, can say. We can say the following.
This work is going on investigating this crime statistically and talking about names. We cannot even preliminary know how many people were killed. The year of large terror, 1937, and then partially 38 and 39, that was the age of large terror in Ukraine. The crimes were not punished because Russian propaganda machine before the Second World War and even more after the Second World War was operating so powerfully that even the children of those tortured and killed activists, the children did not know where they were killed. From 1964, the relatives, those who knew that their relatives were arrested and then shot dead, and they received these rehabilitation certificates, they went to the archives and they received some information on that. But there's no public initiative from the bottom, so that movement becomes more powerful. And it looks like there is quite a strange situation in Ukrainian society. When we talk to people, your relatives were shot dead because they belong to this or that church, and that is the Orthodox Church, Greek Orthodox, Roman Orthodox Church, Protestant churches. Anyone can say that. All those who were deprived of life for non-criminal things. And talking about unpunished crimes today, I would like to say that all these all that has been done, maybe we haven't done too much, but we need to give some time for the public to look at that and to restore the historic memory. I believe that in each family there were probably such people who were not just killed in the Great Patriotic War. The victims of terror were, the number of victims of terror was much bigger probably. And this historic memory should unite Ukrainian society on the basis of that sorrow that Ukrainian people were not talking about for so long. Thank you for attention. Ivan Okoyev, Kyiv NGO memorial named after Vasil Stus from 1966. The Kyiv City Organization has been researching the crimes of totalitarian regime in the 20th century against Ukrainians, against Ukrainian nation. It's worth mentioning that the memorial has created the Museum of Soviet Occupation, which exhibits all the crimes of Soviet regime on the territory of Ukraine. This is 1920s, Holodomor, large, big terror, short Renaissance, those who were activists in the 60s, and the dissidents who were shot for their activities, for their right to talk, for their right to be Ukrainian. And these are the repressions against church, against Ukrainian church, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church in the Western Ukraine. Also, we can mention such places like the Bykivnia, Demyanov Las, Volyn tragedy. Also, it's worth mentioning that Soviet regime has moved so that Ukrainians starting from 1991 start thinking about that. No conclusions were made as to those awful things which were happening in the 20th century in Ukraine. Unfortunately, if you take the vision for the future, then in the history books we are still studying the civil war of the 20th century, but not occupation by Moscow of the territory of Ukraine and national liberation fight of Ukrainians against aggressor. We need to draw conclusions from that, and we need to deeply analyze everything that's happening today, because in Ukraine the war is going on, so that in 100 years we do not have to study civil war in Donbass, so that we are calling things their names, that this is Russian-Ukrainian war for the souls of Ukrainians, because a famous quotation of Bismarck that it's not generals who win the war, but the school teachers and the priests win the war, now is very topical, because in Crimea, in some parts of Donbass, this war was lost, because we have the situation like that now. It's not words that are talking about the guns, but we need to draw a conclusion and move forward. And basically combining the academics, the clergy, the public, all together we need to fight for the souls of Ukrainians and fill in Ukrainians with Ukrainian content. And moving in this direction, we will inevitably prove to the whole world community, to all Ukrainians, that Ukrainian state is strong, is united in as Christians, as citizens, and we will definitely return Donbass and Crimea. And we will be moving in order to strengthen the state of Ukraine, to strengthen its influence on the territory of Eastern Europe and the whole Europe.
Дуже дякуємо, шановні експерти. Чи є...
Thank you, experts. Do you have any questions? Once you have no, then thank you again. Let's hope that school teachers and priests will help us win the war. If you have any news, we'll be happy to see you again. And our next briefing is at 2 o'clock. Thank you.